The evening at the little cafe always felt the same, yet somehow it still managed to carry its own small surprises. Soft music hummed from a speaker near the counter, the lights glowed warm and dim, and the smell of fresh pastries floated in the air. People came to unwind after long days, some alone, some in groups, and some so busy talking that they barely noticed the waitress quietly moving between the tables. She worked the late shift most days, taking orders with a soft voice and a polite smile. She rarely spoke more than she needed to, and the regular customers often forgot she was even there unless they needed a refill or an extra napkin. She didn't mind being unseen. In fact, she preferred it most days. Life had taught her that. Silence was a safe place, a place where no one expected too much and no one asked questions. The cafe had an upright wooden piano sitting in one corner. It was old, with scratches near the keys and a bench that wobbled when someone sat on it. Most people never touched it. Sometimes a child would push a key out of curiosity, but that was all. It had been placed there years ago, long before the waitress had started working. The owner said it made the place look more artistic, even though nobody used it, whenever she passed by it. Her eyes would flicker toward it for just a second. She didn't touch it, didn't sit on the bench, didn't even brush her fingers against the wood. She kept her distance. The way someone avoids an old photograph that brings back memories they are not ready to feel again. That night, as she wiped a table near the window, a group of office workers entered the cafe. They came every Thursday evening, always joking loudly, always carrying the stress of their workday like a badge. They weren't unkind, but they didn't hide their opinions either, and sometimes those opinions stung more than they intended. She walked over with her usual calm expression and her notepad. They placed their ordered tea for one, coffee for another, a slice of cake for the one who always pretended he was on a diet but never actually skipped dessert. While she wrote everything down, she heard one of them say, "Hey, have you ever seen anyone play that old piano?" Another laughed and said, "I doubt it even works anymore." A third one smirked and pointed at her. "Maybe she can play." "Hey, can you play the piano?" She froze for a moment, the pen in her hand pausing above the paper. Her eyes dropped quickly, and she gave a tiny shake of her head. She didn't say anything, just turned to walk back to the counter. She heard their little laughs behind her, as if the idea itself was a joke. When she placed their drinks on the tray behind the counter, her manager walked by. It was a friendly man who tried to keep the cafe peaceful. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. She nodded. She always nodded. It was easier that way. But inside her chest, a familiar ache stirred. The kind of ache that came from being underestimated, from being seen as someone who only existed to clear tables and pour drinks. Job well, but people rarely wondered who she was beyond the apron, beyond the quiet smile. The truth was, she had once spent hours every day sitting at a piano, an old wooden one, much like the one in the cafe. Her grandfather had been the one who taught her. He'd sit next to her, tapping lightly on her wrists whenever her hands tensed up. "Relax," he'd say. "Music is not about force, it's about feeling." She remembered those afternoons, the way sunlight came through the curtains, the way the keys felt warm from her touch, and the sound of her grandfather humming as she practiced. He'd believed she had a gift. He believed she would do something with music someday, but life had changed too quickly. Her grandfather had fallen sick. Hospital bills piled up. Her dreams of playing on bigger stages, joining competitions, or even studying music formally became distant shadows. The piano lessons stopped. The instrument was sold, and she took a job, any job she could find. The cafe became her world, and the piano became a memory she didn't have the strength to revisit. When she returned to the table with the drinks, the group continued chatting loudly. "So imagine," one of them said. "She sits down and starts playing like a pro." "Not happening," another replied. "She looks too scared to even touch the thing." They laughed again, not out of cruelty, but out of carelessness. They didn't realize their words lingered in the air long after they spoke them. At that moment, a small child entered the cafe, with her mother. The little girl, with bright eyes and a soft smile, paused near the piano and touched one of the keys. A soft note rang out. She giggled. The waitress brought a glass of water to their table and noticed the child staring at her. "Do you like the piano?" she asked gently. The girl nodded. Do you play? The question made her heart beat a little faster. She shook her head lightly, but the girl didn't look convinced. I think you can still play, the girl said with simple innocence. Those words settled deep inside her. It didn't feel like pressure. It felt like hope. A little later, when the cafe quieted down, the manager approached her again. You know, he said, glancing toward the piano, you never told me if you can play. She hesitated. I used to, she said quietly. His eyebrows went up with genuine surprise. Really? That's amazing. You should play something one day. Maybe after closing time. People would love it. The thought of playing in front of people made her stomach twist. I don't know, she whispered. It's okay, he said with a smile. No pressure. Just think about it. But the idea wouldn't leave her mind. Every time she passed the piano, she felt something tug at her chest, a pull toward the person she once was, the person she feared she had lost. At around the same time, the office workers had finished their snacks and drinks. One of them looked toward the piano again and said, Hey, why don't you really try playing something? Come on, it'll be fun. The others laughed, but it wasn't mean-spirited this time, just playful, though still careless. She smiled politely, the way she always did when avoiding uncomfortable moments. I should get back to work, she said softly, and walked away. As she cleaned the last few tables, she watched the small girl again. The child pressed a few random keys, creating a clumsy little tune. The mother apologized, but the manager said it was fine. The waitress's heart tightened. Music had once been her language, her story, her comfort. Now she couldn't even bring herself to touch a single key. When the child and her mother left, the girl waved at her. Don't be scared to try, she said with a bright smile. Those words echoed inside her long after the door closed. Later that night, when the cafe grew quiet and only a few customers remained, she found herself glancing again and again toward the piano. The lights reflected softly off the polished wood. It felt almost alive, waiting for someone to wake it. Her hands trembled a little as she wiped down the counter. She remembered her grandfather's voice, the warmth in his tone, the way he believed in her more than anyone ever had. She wondered if touching the keys again would hurt or heal. She didn't know. But she knew one thing. She missed music. She missed it in a way she couldn't explain, like missing a part of herself. The group of office workers were still chatting nearby. One of them suddenly said, She still hasn't played anything for us. Another shrugged. Maybe she's shy. A third laughed lightly. Or maybe she's never touched a piano in her life. Their words didn't sting as much this time. Not because they were kinder, because she was lost in her own thoughts. As the clock ticked closer to closing time, the manager walked past her again and gently tapped the counter with his hand. Before you leave, he said softly, you should play. Just one song. Nobody will judge you. But she wasn't scared of being judged. She was scared of remembering still. Something inside her whispered that maybe it was finally time. She looked at the piano again. It felt like the whole room had become quiet, waiting for her decision. Her palms felt sweaty, her heart beat uneven, but she took a slow breath. And then, for the first time in years, she took a step toward the piano. The room seemed to shift around her as she walked. She felt the eyes of the customers glance in her direction, but she didn't look at any of them. She kept her focus on the wooden bench. When she finally reached it, she placed her hand on the side of the piano. The wood felt cool beneath her fingers. She pulled out the bench gently and sat down. The familiar creak echoed softly. Her heart raced. She lifted her hand and hovered it above the keys, and part one ends exactly at the moment when her fingers begin to lower. As the whole cafe waits to see what will happen next. The moment her fingers touched the first key, a soft note rose into the quiet cafe, almost like a whisper. It wasn't music yet, just a simple test, a small breath of sound. But even that tiny sound made her heart thump harder against her ribs. She wasn't sure if she could do this. She wasn't sure if the person she used to be was still inside her, but she had taken the step. She was sitting at the piano again, behind her. The low chatter of the office workers faded as they leaned in, curious in a way they hadn't been before. A few other customers raised their heads too, their cups halfway to their lips. No one spoke. The manager remained behind the counter, watching her with quiet encouragement. She closed her eyes for a moment. She had always played with her eyes shut when she was younger. Her grandfather used to say, "When your eyes close, your heart opens." She didn't know if that was true anymore, but she let the memory guide her. With a slow and shaky breath, she pressed another key, then another. The notes came out uneven at first. It had been years since she last played. Her fingers felt stiff, unsure. She almost stood upright then, ready to apologize and say she couldn't do it. But something inside her told her to stay, so she stayed. She tried a small scale, her fingers walking up the keys like a child learning to step again after a long rest. The sound wasn't perfect, but it wasn't terrible either. Her hands began to relax little by little. Behind her, the office workers exchanged glances. One of them whispered, "Maybe she actually knows something." Another replied, "Let's see." Their voices didn't bother her this time. The piano absorbed all her focus. And slowly, almost without meaning to, her fingers wandered into a simple melody she had played many times in her childhood. It was one her grandfather loved, a warm, gentle tune meant to calm the heart. The first few seconds were rough. She missed a note, then another. She pressed a key too hard and winced at the sharp sound. She heard one of the office workers let out a small laugh, maybe out of awkwardness, more than mockery. She almost pulled her hands away again, but then she remembered the little girl's words from earlier. "I think you can still play." She let the memory wrap around her like a soft blanket. Steadying her breath, and slowly, she found the rhythm. The broken notes turned smooth, the shaky hands turned steady. The melody began to flow. The café changed with it. The soft music filled the air like a warm breeze. Conversations fell away. Even the sound of cups clinking gently on saucers seemed to blend with the tune rather than interrupt it. The melody carried something deep, something tender and aching. Something full of memories she had buried for too long. Her fingers moved more confidently now, remembering the path they used to know so well. She could almost feel her grandfather's presence beside her, guiding her hands the way he used to. Good. She could almost hear him say, "Let it speak." Behind her, one of the office workers leaned back in his chair, surprised. "Wait a minute," he said under his breath. "She's actually good." Another nodded slowly. "I didn't expect that." Laughter from earlier had completely disappeared. Even the playful smirks were gone. Now their expressions were softer, almost thoughtful, but she didn't see any of this. She didn't even see the café. She was far away. In a memory where sunlight hit the piano at a golden angle and her grandfather hummed along, the manager leaned against the counter, his arms crossed but relaxed, his face full of quiet pride. He had never heard the piano in the café make music before. It had always been a decoration, but now it felt like the heart of the room. A couple sitting near the window stopped, eating their dessert, and listened with a kind of awe. Another customer who had been scrolling through his phone put it down. Unable to ignore the emotion in the air, the waitress played on, losing track of time. She wasn't thinking about the customers anymore, or the office workers, or the risk of making a mistake. She wasn't thinking about the years she had pushed music away. For the first time in a long time, she felt alive in a way she had forgotten was possible. Her hands glided across the keys. Fragile at moments, strong at others. It wasn't a perfect performance. She wasn't a professional. But it was real. It was full of feeling, and that made it beautiful. When she reached the end of the melody, her fingers hovered over the last note for a moment before letting it fade into silence. She didn't move. She didn't dare look up. The café stayed quiet. A deep, meaningful quiet. She finally lifted her hands off the keys and placed them on her lap. Her heart hammered inside her chest. She wasn't sure if she should turn around. She didn't know what kind of reaction she would face. Then, from behind her, someone breathed out softly and said, "Wow." The word was simple, but it carried a weight she felt in her chest. She finally turned her head just slightly. The office workers were staring at her, not mocking, not amused, but stunned. One of them had his mouth slightly open. Another looked almost embarrassed for the things he had said earlier. The manager gave her a warm smile. "That was beautiful," he said. Her eyes lowered shyly, and she quickly stood up from the bench. She hurried back behind the counter, wanting to hide from all the attention she wasn't used to. But the moment she disappeared behind the counter, the cafe slowly began buzzing again, not with laughter, not with noise, but with soft conversations. She played so well. I didn't expect that from her. Did you hear the emotion in that song? Their words floated through the air, but this time she didn't feel the usual ache. She felt something different, something warm, almost like validation, something she had forgotten she needed. She tried to focus on her tasks against leaning the counter, arranging the cups, checking the pastry displayed, but her hands still felt the shape of the piano keys. Her mind replayed the melody over and over. Then the manager walked over with a gentle expression. "You have a gift," he said softly. "You shouldn't hide it." She looked down at her hands. They still trembled faintly. "I don't know," she whispered. "You do," he insisted. "I saw how everyone reacted. You touched them. That's what real music does." She didn't know what to say. Compliments felt foreign, like they were meant for someone else. Then one of the office workers approached the counter. He cleared his throat, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Hey," he started about earlier. "We didn't mean to make fun of you. We just didn't know." She gave a small smile and shook her head lightly. "It's okay." "No," he said, shaking his head. "It's not. You're really talented. I mean it." The others walked over too, offering small smiles and nods of appreciation. They weren't laughing now. They weren't teasing. They were sincere, one woman said. "The way you played. It reminded me of something I hadn't felt in a long time. So thank you." Her eyes softened. "I'm glad you liked it," she said quietly, after they returned to their table. She stood there for a moment, taking in what had happened. She wasn't used to people acknowledging her. She wasn't used to standing out. But something had shifted tonight. The piano wasn't just a decoration anymore. It had become a bridge between her and the world she kept at a distance. Later, when the cafe was about to close, the manager called her over again. "You know," he said gently, "you could play a full piece next time. If you ever feel ready, next time." She repeated softly. He nodded. "People would come to listen. I'm sure of it." She looked toward the piano once more. The corner where it stood seemed to glow softly under the dim lights. It no longer felt intimidating. It felt like a friend she had lost and unexpectedly found again. She wasn't sure if she could play in front of others again. She wasn't sure if tonight was a one-time moment of courage, but she knew she wanted to try. Before leaving the cafe, she walked to the piano one more time. She didn't play anything not tonight. She just ran her fingers gently across the keys, feeling the cool surface beneath her skin. "I'm still here," she whispered in her mind, not sure if she meant herself or the music. And as she walked out into the night air, she felt a quiet spark inside her, small, fragile, but real. A spark that told her this was just the beginning. The next day at the cafe began like any other, yet there was something different in the air, something she felt before she even tied her apron. It wasn't loud or obvious, but it was there, a kind of quiet attention, a warm curiosity. She had spent the whole night thinking about the song she played and the way people reacted. She wasn't used to anyone watching her with interest. She wasn't used to being noticed at all. As she stepped inside, the soft jingling of the doorbell greeted her. The morning shift was already underway, and a few early customers sat with newspapers and steaming cups of tea. The manager gave her a friendly nod from behind the counter. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm in a way that told her he remembered last night too. She nodded back, setting her bag down. Her hands brushed against the fabric of her apron as she tied it, and for a moment she looked over toward the corner. The piano stood quietly as always, but now it felt different, almost alive. She didn't know how one simple song could change the way she saw it, but it had. She had barely started wiping tables when one of the regular morning customers approached her. She was an older woman who usually kept to herself, spending hours reading books while sipping tea. Today she gave the waitress a gentle smile. "I heard you played the piano last night," she said softly. The waitress froze for a moment, surprised. "Yes," she answered quietly. I wasn't here, the woman said, but the others were talking about it. They said it was beautiful. A warm blush rose to her cheeks. Thank you, she murmured. The woman nodded and returned to her seat, leaving her with a curious flutter in her chest. People were talking. Not about mistakes. Not about what she couldn't do. But about something she could. Throughout the morning, more customers came in, some who had been there the previous night. Some who hadn't. But the way they looked at her felt different. Softer. Kinder. Some of them even gave her a smile, as if they knew something about her she had tried to keep hidden. When the office workers arrived again in the late afternoon, she felt a flicker of nervousness. Their laughter filled the room as always, but it didn't have the same edge it once did. When she took their order, they didn't tease her. Instead, one of them said, "Hey, you played really well last night." She smiled shyly. "Thank you," another added. "It caught us off guard." In a good way. Their honesty made her chest warm. She nodded and went back to the counter with their order. As she walked, she felt lighter than usual. Like someone had quietly taken away a weight she had carried for years. By evening, the cafe grew busier. People talked, laughed, and enjoyed their meals, but the piano kept catching their eyes. Some customers even pointed at it while whispering softly. A few asked the manager if the piano was going to be played tonight. The manager glanced at her with a gentle grin. "It's your call," he said quietly. She swallowed. She hadn't expected this. She didn't know if she could play again. Yesterday had been a moment of bravery, but bravery didn't always stay. Sometimes it came and went like a small wave. Still, she found herself glancing at the piano throughout the evening. A few times she saw the little girl from the previous day walk into her mind, the child's hopeful eyes, her tiny voice saying, "I think you can still play." As the cafe entered the quiet hours, she found herself cleaning the tables near the piano. Her fingers brushed against the bench as she wiped down the nearby chairs, and she felt a soft shiver run up her arm. The bench creaked slightly as she moved past it, almost as if calling her. She took a breath. She looked around the room. People were scattered around, finishing desserts or chatting softly. Not many, not a crowd. Just a handful who seemed quietly content. Then she looked at the manager, gave a very small nod as if saying only if you want to. She wasn't pressured. She wasn't pushed. The choice was her own, and this time she chose. She walked toward the piano slowly. A few customers noticed and nudged each other gently. The manager lowered the music from the speakers until it faded completely, leaving only the soft sounds of cups and whispers. She sat down on the bench again. Her hands trembled, but less than the night before. She rested them on her lap for a moment, steadying her breath. Then she placed her fingers on the keys. This time, she didn't start with the melody from yesterday. She tried something new. Something she made up years ago but never finished. A tune she used to hum while doing chores, while walking home, while dreaming quietly of a life filled with music. At first the keys felt unfamiliar again. But soon her fingers remembered how to move, slow and gentle. She played a soft pattern, one note after the other. Forming a simple string of sound that wrapped around the room, the cafe grew still. Caught in the fragile beauty of the music, this piece wasn't something polished or rehearsed. It wasn't something she had mastered. It was raw, forming itself as she played it. Each note came from places inside her she hadn't touched in a long time. Places filled with longing, sadness, hope. As the melody grew, a young couple near the window held hands a little tighter. A man in the corner closed his eyes, letting the sound settle deep inside his heart. Even the office workers were silent, their usual jokes forgotten. She felt the world soften around her. Her mind drifted again to her. Grandfather, his gentle hands guiding hers, his warm voice reminding her to feel the music. She could almost hear him now, humming along quietly in her memory. Her breath steadied. She let the music shape itself. She didn't force it. She didn't worry about mistakes. She simply played. The manager watched in awe. He had never imagined someone so quiet could carry so much emotion inside. He realized then that people often hide the most beautiful parts of themselves behind silence. As the melody continued, the customers forgot where they were. The cafe became something else entirely, a small pocket of peace, woven from sound and memory. When she reached the final note, her hand hovered for a moment before letting it fade gently. Silence followed again, soft and respectful. Then, slowly, people began to breathe again. She didn't stand immediately this time. She kept her hands on the keys, letting the quiet settle inside her. She felt calm in a way she hadn't felt in years. A soft clap started from somewhere behind her. Then another, and another. Soon the small cafe filled with steady applause, not forced, but full of warmth. Her heart swelled. She lowered her gaze and gave a shy, grateful smile before standing up. A customer approached her as she stepped away from the piano. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes who had sat alone in the corner. "I don't know much about music," he said softly, "but that made my whole day better." Her eyes widened with surprise. "Thank you," she whispered. Another customer added, "You play like someone who feels every note." She didn't know how to respond. She was still getting used to being spoken to with such kindness as the cafe cleared out for the night. The manager walked beside her. "You know," he said gently, "you could do this more often." She hesitated. "I don't know if I'm good enough." "People don't clap for something that's not good," he replied with a smile. She couldn't deny that. She had heard the applause. She had felt it. Later, when she stepped outside into the calm night air, she held her coat a little tighter around herself. The sky above was dark, but peaceful, the cool breeze brushing against her face. She walked slowly, lost in thought. She didn't rush home the way she usually did. She let her steps fall naturally, her mind drifting through the memories of her playing, the way people listened, the way the music flowed, the warmth she felt. It had been a long time since she felt proud as she walked. She realized something quietly, but clearly. Music wasn't just a memory. It wasn't something she had lost forever. It was still a part of her, deep and alive, waiting for her to return to it, and now she was finally ready to listen. This was the moment new beginnings often hide in quiet. Simple, unnoticed by the world, but felt so deeply inside the heart. She reached her doorstep with a small, gentle smile. Tomorrow, she knew, she would walk into the cafe not just as a waitress, but as someone rediscovering her music, someone who was slowly, bravely stepping back toward herself. The next morning began quietly, but there was a kind of nervous energy in the air, the kind that sits softly on the shoulders and makes every small moment feel heavier than usual. At the cafe, the doorbell chimed as the first customers filtered in, but even the regulars felt something different. They didn't know why, but they sensed a shift around the place. Maybe it was because the workers were whispering a little less and watching the piano a little more. Maybe it was because of the warm mood from the night before, a mood that had not completely faded. The young waitress walked through the narrow back hallway with a tray in her hands. Breathing deeply to steady herself, she had not slept well. Her mind kept replaying the scene from last night, the crowd listening. The silence after her final chord, the applause, and the questions people asked her afterward. Some had congratulated her with real softness in their voices. Others had asked if she had learned somewhere special. A few even wanted to know if she played often. She kept thinking about the faces of the students who had mocked her earlier. They had changed when they realized it was not a joke. Their smirks had fallen away so quickly, replaced by surprise and shame. She didn't know why that memory kept coming back. Maybe because she wasn't used to being taken seriously, not in the cafe, not in life, not even at home. She tried to shake the thoughts away and focus on work. The breakfast rush began, louder and livelier than usual. The head cook teased her lightly, asking if she planned on playing again today. She laughed it off with a wave of her hand, pretending not to think about it. But inside she was more unsure than ever. The cafe owner approached her as she wiped down a table. He was an older man with a gentle tone, even when he was firm. He placed a hand on the back of the empty chair next to her and said softly, "People have been talking." The morning sun peeked through the thin curtains of her small room, painting warm lines across the wall. She lay awake long before her alarm, staring at the ceiling, feeling everything and nothing at the same time. Her heart carried the weight of the night before, the applause, unexpected attention, the strangers who suddenly seemed to understand her in a way no one had for years. She was proud but also confused. Something had shifted in her life. She didn't quite know what to do with it. She sat up slowly and placed her feet on the cold floor. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers still tingling with the memory of the piano keys. Those same fingers had once felt like a burden, a reminder of a dream she had let go of. Now they felt completely different, alive, like they still had something left to offer the world. After a long breath, she got ready for work. She didn't do anything special, no makeup, no new clothes, nothing fancy. She tied her hair the same way she always did, wore the same simple uniform, and walked the same route to the café. But inside her chest, a quiet spark glowed, one she had not felt in many years. When she reached the café door, she paused. Through the glass, she could see customers already sitting at tables, sipping their drinks and chatting softly. It was unusual for so many people to be there this early. Her stomach tightened with nerves. Were they waiting for her? Were they expecting her to play again? She opened the door gently, the bell chiming overhead. The moment she stepped in, a few heads turned toward her, not in a harsh or judging way, but with recognition, like they were seeing her differently. The owner waved from behind the counter with a smile that was far warmer than usual. "Morning," he greeted her, his voice friendly. "Busy day already. People came earlier than we expected." The sun rose slowly over the quiet town, casting soft golden light across the streets as she walked toward the café. She felt the air on her face, cool and gentle. A reminder that another day was beginning, another day that felt strangely different from all the ones before it. Not louder, not busier, but fuller somehow. Like something unseen was opening up in front of her. Even if she couldn't quite understand it yet, she walked with her hands tucked inside her sleeves, fingers brushing against each other as she replayed the last few days in her mind. The music, the applause, the sudden attention, the unexpected kindness, all of it still felt unreal. She had spent so long believing her piano days were over, buried under the weight of real-life bills, work, long hours, exhaustion, the need to stay afloat. Yet, now the dream she once held so close was finding its way back to her, piece by piece. When she reached the café, she stopped outside the glass door. The inside looked busier than usual again. People were talking, laughing softly, waiting for their orders. She took a deep breath before stepping in. The moment she entered, the owner looked up from behind the counter and smiled wide, as though he had been waiting for her. "Good morning," he said warmly. She greeted him back and moved toward the staff area to put her things away. But as she passed the tables, she noticed something. A few people lifted their heads when she walked by. Not in an uncomfortable or invasive way, but in a subtle, gentle recognition. Like they knew something about her they hadn't known before. Like they saw her differently. Some even smiled. She offered small smiles back, though her heart thudded a little faster. She wasn't used to being noticed. She wasn't used to being someone people talked about. After hanging up her coat, she went straight to work. She took orders, served plates, cleaned tables, and brought refills, just as she always did. But even in the middle of all the movement, she couldn't ignore the piano in the corner. It sat quietly under the morning light, almost glowing, almost calling her. She tried not to look at it too often, afraid someone might think she wanted to play again right away. But the truth was, she did want to. She wanted to more than she had wanted anything in years. As the morning went on, the café grew busier. The sound of chatter filled the space, and the smell of warm pastries drifted through the air. She moved around with calm focus, feeling oddly more confident than before. Even when the rush got heavy, she still felt that small spark inside her, steady, warm, grounding. Around lunchtime, the owner approached her quietly and asked if they could talk for a moment. She nodded and followed him to the back, near the supply shelves. He looked at her for a moment, almost like he was trying to choose the right words. "A lot of people have been asking about you," he said softly. "About the music." She blinked in surprise. "About me?" He nodded. "They're curious. They want to know if you'll play again. Some even asked if we could schedule it. Maybe once a week, maybe more." I didn't want to promise anything without talking to you first. She looked down, unsure of what to say. She'd never imagined people would come to the cafe to hear her play. Never imagined strangers would care about her music at all. I don't want you to feel pressured, the owner continued gently. You don't owe anyone anything. But if you want to, just if you're welcome to play. Whenever you feel ready. Her throat tightened with emotion. She didn't answer right away. She thought about her grandfather, about the years of practice, about the dream she once carried so proudly. She thought about how part of that dream had dimmed, not from lack of courage, but from the weight of life. But now, something had changed, I think. She began, voice quiet. I think I want to try. The owner smiled with genuine warmth. Whenever you want. You don't have to tell anyone first. You can just sit down and play. After their talk, she returned to the front of the cafe. She continued working as usual, but every so often, her eyes drifted to the piano again, this time with less fear and more hope. Later in the afternoon, when the rush slowed and the cafe grew a little quieter, she found herself standing near the counter, wiping down trays. Her eyes drifted again toward the piano. No one was paying much attention at that moment. A few customers were chatting. A couple sat reading. Others sipped their drinks while scrolling on their phones. She set the tray down. Her heart beat faster. It would be easy to walk away, to pretend she didn't feel the urge building inside her. Easy to hide behind her routine and fear. But sometimes life gives a small window, and something inside you whispers to take it before it closes. So she walked toward the piano. She moved quietly, not drawing attention. She sat down slowly, her hands trembling just a little. The seat felt just as it had the last few times, old but familiar, worn but comforting. She placed her fingers gently on the keys. She took a long breath. Then she began to play. This time the song was different from the night before. Softer, lighter, almost like a conversation between her heart and the world. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It wasn't meant to impress anyone. It was simply honest, simple notes woven with feeling. She didn't notice at first. But as the melody drifted through the room, heads slowly lifted. People turned one by one. Some paused mid-sip, others quietly lowered their books. The atmosphere shifted, becoming calmer. Warmer, her music floated like sunlight through the windows, settling softly on everyone present. A few children leaned closer to listen. A couple at the corner table smiled at each other. Two older women closed their eyes and relaxed into their seats. Even the staff in the kitchen peeked out, drawn by the sound. She kept playing, letting the notes guide her. With each passing moment, her fear slipped away. She felt the old joy, the deep kind. The kind that comes when a person reconnects with something they thought they had lost forever. When the song ended, there was a brief, gentle silence. Then a few soft claps. Then more. Not loud or overwhelming, just warm. Encouraging applause. She lifted her eyes, cheeks slightly flushed, and gave a small smile. People smiled back, not with disbelief or mockery, but with genuine appreciation. The sound wasn't about her being perfect. It wasn't about being impressive. It was about the feeling she shared. Afterward, a young man approached her politely and said, "Your music. It makes the room feel different. Thank you." She didn't know what to say for a moment. Compliments still felt strange, new. But she nodded softly and thanked him. As she stood from the piano, she felt lighter, like a weight she had carried for years had finally loosened. And from that moment onward, something began to blossom. People returned to the cafe more often. Some came alone, some with friends. Some asked quietly if she might play again, though they never pressured her. The owner started leaving a small sign near the counter that read, "Live piano, occasional afternoons." She didn't play every day. She didn't force herself. She played only when her heart felt ready, but she played. And with each song, confidence grew. Days passed. And then weeks. One afternoon, a woman approached her after hearing her play a music teacher from the nearby community center. She spoke kindly and said she had heard talent, real talent, the kind that could grow with guidance. She invited the waitress to visit the center. to consider joining their small evening music group. The invitation humbled her. She didn't answer right. Away-old doubts whispered inside her, but the spark in her chest glowed brighter. "I'll think about it." The teacher smiled and told her the door would always be open. That night, she walked home under the dim streetlights. She wrapped her arms around herself and let the cool breeze wash over her. She felt tired but alive. She felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time: possibility. The world still looked the same, but she didn't feel the same inside it. Her footsteps were slow, thoughtful, steady. Her dream wasn't gone. It was just beginning again. The morning air felt a little cooler when she stepped outside that day. The kind of cool that hinted the season was slowly changing. She wrapped her arms around herself and walked at her usual pace. But inside, she felt something different, something she couldn't fully describe. It wasn't nervousness, and it wasn't fear exactly. It was more like a soft, steady hope mixed with a little uncertainty. She had been playing at the cafe here and there for weeks now, sometimes once a day, sometimes every few days, depending on how she felt. She didn't want it to be an obligation. She didn't want it to become something heavy or something she felt forced into. Music had once been her dream. She didn't want it to become another responsibility she had to carry. The customers had grown used to the idea of hearing her play. Some still looked surprised when the first notes drifted through the room, but most of them now recognized her gift. They watched her gently, kindly, never pushing, never asking too much. The room always felt warmer when she played. Even the owner was different these days. He wasn't just her boss anymore. He spoke to her like he truly saw her now, not just as another staff member serving plates and coffee, but as someone with a special talent, someone who mattered. But today was different. Today, she was meeting the music teacher from the community center. It wasn't an audition or anything official. The teacher had told her she could simply come and observe, or try a few notes with their evening group if she wanted. There was no pressure, no expectations, but even that felt huge to her. The idea of being around trained musicians again made her nervous. She hadn't practiced seriously in years. Her fingers were still strong from playing at the cafe, but she worried they weren't fast enough. She worried she wasn't good enough. She worried she didn't belong. But something inside her whispered that she needed to try. She reached the cafe and stepped inside. The owner gave her a quick smile. The place was already busy with customers, filling the tables, some enjoying breakfast, some waiting for takeout. She tied her apron around her waist and started her usual tasks. The whole morning, she kept thinking about the community center. What if she froze? What if she embarrassed herself? What if she sat at the piano and nothing came out? She tried to push the thoughts away and focus on work, but her mind wandered back again and again. When lunchtime came, she found herself glancing toward the piano. The urge to play was strong, stronger than usual. She wondered if maybe it would help calm her down. The owner noticed her gaze and nodded gently. "If you want to play for a bit, go ahead. We could use the calm atmosphere. It's getting noisy in here." He said it like a quiet suggestion, not a request. She took a slow breath and walked toward the piano. The room wasn't completely silent, but there was enough space for her music to breathe. She sat down and let her fingers rest on the keys. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the familiar comfort wash over her. Then she played. This melody was different. It was softer than her usual pieces, almost like a lullaby. The notes floated through the air, gentle and steady, like a heartbeat. People turned toward her one by one. Conversations softened. Forks paused midair. Even the kitchen noise faded. The music soothed her nervous thoughts. It centered her. It reminded her of the nights she had played at home when she was younger. Life was simpler when she believed the world was open and wide. When the song ended, a few people clapped softly. She gave a shy smile and returned to work, but the calm stayed with her as the afternoon went on. She served customers and cleaned tables, all while thinking about the community center. Part of her still wanted to back out, to pretend she wasn't ready, to hide behind routine. But another part, a stronger part, knew she couldn't keep living inside her fear. When her shift ended, she changed quickly and put on her jacket. She told the owner she'd see him tomorrow, and he said, "Good luck tonight. We'll do great." She tried to smile even if she didn't fully believe it. She walked toward the community center, her hands tucked into her pockets. The sun was lower now, brushing the buildings with warm orange light. The streets were calmer, with fewer cars, a few people walking dogs or returning home. When she reached the building, she paused outside the doors, staring at the large windows. Inside, she could see a few people setting up chairs, arranging sheet music, tuning instruments. Her heart beat faster. She stepped inside slowly. The music. Teacher noticed her right away and walked over with a welcoming smile. "I'm glad you came," she said warmly. "We're just warming up. You can join us or just watch. Whatever feels right." She nodded nervously and followed her deeper into the room. There were about 8 people there, some older, some younger, all holding different instruments. A violin, a flute, a guitar, even a small drum. They greeted her politely, with friendly nods and warm smiles. The atmosphere wasn't strict or formal. It was gentle, relaxed. Everyone seemed comfortable with each other. The teacher gestured to the piano at the corner of the room. It wasn't fancy, but it was well kept, with polished keys and a sturdy bench. "You can sit if you want," the teacher said. She hesitated. The piano felt like both a friend and a test, but she walked toward it anyway and sat down. She placed her hands gently on the keys. "You don't have to play anything difficult," the teacher said softly. "Just something small, something that feels natural to you." She nodded slowly. She took a breath. Then she played a few simple chords, soft, careful, testing the piano sound. The others listened quietly, not judging, just appreciating. A woman with a violin joined in, adding a light harmony. Then the guitarist added soft, steady chords. They matched her pace naturally, like they understood her without needing words. She played more confidently. The music grew fuller, richer. The room filled with warm sound, like colors mixing softly together. She felt her nerves turning to calm. She felt her breathing steady. She felt seen, but in a gentle way, not the overwhelming attention she got at the café. When the song faded, the room was quiet for a moment. Then the teacher spoke softly. "You have a natural instinct," she said. "You listen, you feel the room. That matters more than technique." Her throat tightened. He didn't know how to respond. Compliments still felt strange, but also deeply meaningful. The group invited her to play another piece. She agreed, feeling more comfortable now. They played together for a